Hi, guys. I hope you had a great weekend. We are just going to cover the last piece of chapter 13 today, which is going to involve the cycles of matter that are important to our ecosystems. We are almost done. We only have a few chapters left. So we are ready to finish out the year relatively quickly. So 13.5 is all about the cycling of matter. And we're going to look at the hydraulic cycle, which is the pathway of water from the atmosphere to Earth's surface, below ground, and back again. We're also going to take a look at some biogeochemical cycles that are the movement of chemicals through biological, geological, or the living and non-living parts of an ecosystem. And nitrogen fixation is the process by which certain types of bacteria convert gaseous nitrogen into nitrogen-containing compounds. Water is the most abundant and most important compound that we're going to talk about, and its cycle through the environment. It's also called the hydraulic cycle. So water first enters the environment through precipitation in the form of either rain or snow. Some seeps into the ground, drops into bodies of water like oceans, lakes, and ponds. Evaporation then puts water back into the atmosphere. So visually, this is in your notes. You'll have all of these graphics in your guided note sheet, but just quickly going over it. So we start with our precipitation in either the form of rain or snow. So some goes into groundwater, becomes groundwater, and is absorbed by the plants. Plants give off water through transpiration, which goes into condensation and back to precipitation. The other side of the water cycle goes the precipitation into surface runoff, or the accumulation of water in bodies of water, and evaporation back into condensation and back to precipitation again. Some droplets of water are quickly re-entering the atmosphere through evaporation. 85% of evaporation occurs between oceans and the atmosphere. Obviously, those big bodies of water are going to evaporate much quicker than the smaller bodies of water. On land, water vapor is released by plants during transpiration. It's the same process, just done by plants. The cycle is completed when water vapor in the atmosphere is condensed to form clouds, which will return the water to the environment in the form of precipitation. There are 6 important chemicals or elements that are vital for life on Earth. Start with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Then we have nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. A biogeochemical is the movement of those 6 chemicals through the living and non-living parts of the organism. We are not going to look at all 6, but we will take a closer look at some of them. First, the oxygen cycle. This is pretty straightforward and it's pretty easy. It's the process of plants and animals passing back and forth oxygen. So this is through photosynthesis and cellular respiration. If you think back to those chapters, we have plants that perform photosynthesis. They let go of oxygen. We breathe in the oxygen, breathe out the carbon dioxide that gets taken in by the plant, and so on and so forth. That's pretty much all the oxygen cycle really is. It's just the movement of oxygen between plants and animals into the atmosphere and out again. The carbon cycle is a little bit more important. Carbon is considered the building block of life. It is the key to all the structure of all organisms. Continuously flowing of carbon from the environment into the living things and back into the environment again. Carbon does exist in the non-living or abiotic world in several different forms, as carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere, HCO3 in dissolved water, fossil fuels, the underground deposits of oil, natural gas, and coal, carbonated rocks like coal, limestone, and granite, and then dead organic matter in the soil. The simplest transfer of carbon occurs between plants and animals using the hydrogen or the oxygen cycle, that movement of oxygen to carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and cellular respiration. But humans are the biggest contributor to CO2 gas in the atmosphere through the emissions of fossil fuels and cars and all of those types of things. Those put CO2 back into the atmosphere. which get absorbed by plants. Volcanoes can put CO2 back into the atmosphere. Water, because of the organisms that live in water. And it pretty much just goes on and on. Lightning can actually put carbon back into the environment from the atmosphere. The nitrogen cycle, so 78% of Earth's atmosphere is actually made up of nitrogen gas. Most people think that the most abundant element in our atmosphere is oxygen, and it is not. It is nitrogen. Bacteria in the soil that are known as nitrogen-fixing bacteria are responsible for converting gaseous nitrogen into ammonia, which then can be converted into ammonium when a hydrogen atom is added. This process helps create a element and a compound containing nitrogen that plants are able to absorb through their roots and into their leaves. And this is how humans and other animals are able to eat the nitrogen that we need. Nitrogen is very important to most of the amino acids that we need in our body. So they have to be there they have to get into the plant somehow. Ammonium is the most common source of nitrogen used by all living things. And some ammonium is actually converted into nitrate in the soil, which is a process called nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen gets released into the soil and is absorbed by plants, which convert them into organic compounds such as amino acids and proteins. Animals eat that plant matter, which helps us absorb the amino acids and proteins we need to make more amino acids and proteins in our body. Decomposition of all living things puts nitrogen back into the soil through the use of those decomposers. And the phosphorus cycle. Phosphorus does not include the atmosphere. It begins when phosphate gets released by weathering rocks. Plants and some fungi near the plant roots are able to take up phosphate. We do need phosphate to make ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And it's also in most of our amino acids and proteins that we need in our body. Phosphorus does re-enter the soil when decomposers break down that dead organic matter. Some can leach into the soil from groundwater, and then it is released by the weathering of newly formed rock through geological uplifting over and over again. So you'll notice there's no atmosphere here. So mining and agricultural runoff also add to the overall amount of phosphorus in the environment. So we don't include the atmosphere. Phosphate gets uptaken by plants. It's added through fertilizer due to runoff or the extraction from mines, erosion, decomposition, dissolved phosphates in water, uptake by plants, uptake by algae, and then we eat all of those plant matter to get the phosphorus in our bodies. But that is all I have for you today. So make sure you complete your Food Web Food Chain worksheet due at midnight and work on your notes for this section of your PowerPoint.